Um, hopefully get many of you interested in applying to participate and working with us on it. I'm Kyle Shelton. I'm the director of the Center for Transportation Studies at the University of Minnesota, one of several partners from the university who's been working on this Empowering Small Minnesota Communities program today. And we're gonna talk through, I'm gonna apologize for my voice. I'm also fighting many of those same joyful cold germs that I'm sure many of you are as well. We're gonna talk through a number of things today. We have about probably 35 to 40 minutes of presentation, and then we'll have about the same amount of time in questions and answers at the end. We're really excited to be able to address some of those questions that I'm sure will come up with you all. Here's the agenda for today. I'm going to go through. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Andy in a moment and the other members of the regional teams that will be supporting folks across the state to introduce themselves. We'll talk about what the program is, why we're doing it now, and partnering with the legislature who's funding it to bring this to small communities, and then talk a little bit about the process and other pieces. So I will hand over to Andy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andy Sutton. I work with Kyle as one of the members of the Empowering Small Minnesota Communities team. And we've been collaborating together with other amazing colleagues across the University of Minnesota in various programs to develop this Empowering Small Minnesota Communities program that we're sharing with you today. And in addition to developing the program with Kyle and others, I also represent the Southeast region. So that's the orange circle that you see down in the corner of the state. And so that means that I'd be the primary contact for all communities who are in Southeast Minnesota who are interested in exploring ideas and submitting proposals to the Empowering Small Minnesota Community Program. And you'll now have an opportunity to hear from all of the different team members who are serving our state in these different programs. Each of us has a regional focus, but I want to emphasize that we are all collaborating very closely. And so we are making sure that through this collaboration, anyone who comes in, if you reach out to one person, or if you are not sure exactly where your community or idea fits across the state, there is no wrong door. You can reach out to one of us and we will find the right community contact for you. And I also want to emphasize the overlap. So you see that these circles on the slide have a lot of overlap with one another. So really, if you have questions about where your project idea fits, there is a list of counties and Native nations on the ESMC website where you can see sort of technically the boundaries. But because of all of this overlap, again, you can reach out to the person who you think might be the best contact. And if there's someone else who you need to be in touch with as well, or differently, we will make sure to make those connections for you. And so now to meet other team members who are representing each of the regions, I want to pass it to my colleague in the Southwest, Ann Dibsetter.
Hi there, my name is Ann Dibsetter, and I am representing the Southwest region. You can see that on the screen in that kind of dark green circle, and I look forward to hearing from folks from my region.
Good afternoon, everyone. Molly Zins here, and I serve our central region. That's kind of the light green circle in the central or sort of north central part of the state. And like Ann, super duper looking forward to hearing from lots of folks all across our region.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon Stassen. I represent the Northwest region of RSDP, so upper left of the state in a kind of brownish circle, and just very excited to have each of you here. I'll also introduce a colleague, David Abaz, who is in the Northeast region. So you see the blue in the upper right part of the state. David Abaz staffs the Northeast region. So looking forward to hearing from a bunch of you in the coming weeks.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Greco. I represent the 11 county Twin Cities metro region, which is the sort of grayish circle in the middle on the right of the map. And like all of my colleagues, very looking forward to seeing some great proposals.
All right, thanks everybody. And I think colleagues there, we didn't have you with the ability to turn your cameras on. I think you can now if you want to turn your camera on and say hi. You should be able to, so apologies for that. They'll pop in there. You should be able to see them as they come in. So there's actually a face behind all those voices. Thanks, guys. All right. So in addition to the fine folks who just introduced yourselves, we're also working with folks from the Minnesota Design Center and from the Humphrey School of Public Affairs, as well as the Regional Sustainable Development Partnerships, Cura and the Resilient Communities Project that Mike is from, and the Center for Transportation Studies. That's the cohort of university folks. So now just to talk a little bit about why we talked with the legislature about doing this and want to talk with you all about this moment in this program. As many of you know, this is really an unprecedented time for funding and infrastructure across the nation. We are really thinking about infrastructure broadly for this program. It's not just transportation. It's not just in our purview at CTS. It's water infrastructure, it's parks and trails, it's your public buildings. It might be things like emergency preparedness, could be energy efficiency, and it's also housing. It can also be sort of less concrete things like economic development and social and cultural vitality, quality of life, where we really want to think about infrastructure broadly in this program. And a lot of the funding that's available kind of cross-cuts a variety of infrastructure types. And so that's part of how we're approaching this. It's a really big amount of funding, both at the federal level and the state level. And as you all know, many of you on this call, oftentimes small communities have struggles accessing that big funding, whether it's because of bandwidth issues or knowing that a funding opportunity is out there, or funding opportunities are limited to large communities, things like that. One of the things that we really want to highlight with this is that there are funding streams for lots of jurisdictions, for lots of you, for lots of communities, and we want to help support the creation of projects and kind of getting projects further down a pipeline in ways that allow you all to access this funding. It's important to notice, important to acknowledge, as I say that though, that we kind of see ourselves as a key cog in the pipeline, kind of building towards ultimate proposals. But as Andy will talk about later, we're really seeing ourselves as helping you ideally build projects and build ideas that can help you access a lot of this other funding that you see here. There's a lot of federal funding, whether that's from the Infrastructure Investment and Job Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, or there's a lot of state funding as well. LCCMR, MnDOT and DEED all have funds. Lots of state agencies have additional funds. And one of the things we're hoping to do as we go through this process with selected communities is to also help identify what further funding streams there may be as we go forward there. And again, our hope is that we can kind of help track where these funding streams are and help identify with folks that we're talking with and projects and ideas that you're working on to say, hey, now that we're at this stage, this might be a great asset for you to think about. I'll hand it back to Anne.
And as Kyle mentioned, these funding opportunities, they're varied, they're large, they're competitive, and many of them are meant to specifically support small communities, rural communities, remote communities, and historically and currently underrepresented communities. But you know, many of these groups, as Kyle mentioned, may have really great ideas or innovative visions, but may encounter a variety of challenges that might make it hard to take advantage of these large state and federal funding opportunities. And challenges with time, capacity, expertise, navigating funding programs, technical requirements. So as we continue with the presentation, we hope you'll share some of these challenges you might be facing in the chat. It'll be helpful for us to see some of the specific barriers you might be facing when it comes to taking advantage of these larger funding programs, and really, you know, think about how the ESMC program can meet those challenges with solutions or anticipate some of those challenges as we start to look at some of the proposals that are coming in. And so I wanted next to talk about sort of what is the Empowering Small Minnesota Communities program. So the focus of this program is really supporting communities throughout the entire state of Minnesota. So that includes the metro area by adding capacity. And the capacity is specifically through University of Minnesota researchers and building community university teams that really can work together to develop some of those visions or ideas small communities might bring for sustainable, resilient, economic, social, and built infrastructure into projects that are really well positioned to benefit from some of these state or federal or other funding programs. So It emphasizes a partnership with the University of Minnesota, but communities are really in the lead, driving some of the work that might unfold in because of the support of this program. So this means that small communities who are involved are going to be framing the work and the ideas for some of these projects and outcomes based on the visions that you have or strengths that you see in your communities. Participating communities will be able to vet the university teams and proposed approaches to ensure that whatever collaborative partnership is developed, that it really is strong and able to be ongoing and mutual. Communities will be collaborating on plans of work and budgets and providing final approval for those plans of work and budgets. So it really is a mutual vision for what is co-created for the work that unfolds as a result of this program. And then community members really walk alongside these university teams throughout the entirety of the work. So they will be providing leadership and direction, and specifically really leading on many of the local engagement efforts that might be part of whatever plan of work is developed. And the outcomes can be varied. So we're talking in very general terms because there are a lot of different kinds of projects and ideas that can come in and possible outcomes on the other end. But we do, again, Kyle mentioned this before, we want to be really clear that the program is not set up to provide communities with a full completed grant proposal at the end. But we're fortunate to be working very closely with a huge network of programs across the state, across the Midwest, who do specifically provide some of those grant writing supports and other opportunities. So we will for sure be leveraging those connections and making sure that projects that are, coming into the ESMC, when they're ready to emerge and move on to that next step, that they have the support or connections that they need to move a project closer toward whatever that state or federal proposal might be, or closer to realizing those funding goals. And again, it's helpful to envision, from initial idea all the way to receiving funding as a pipeline. And ESMC is really in those beginning stages of developing ideas, developing visions, strategies that can then be more directional towards some of those state or funding opportunities that are out there. And, I just want to emphasize that this is really about capacity. So the ESMC program is providing research and people power really to build and grow these community-led ideas that you might want to submit to the program, and turn those ideas and visions into concrete materials, concrete plans, in order to make sure that they're well positioned to benefit from some of these large investment opportunities at the state or federal level or otherwise. Now, there's three different, I'm just going to advance the slide here. There's three different ways that the communities can engage with the ESMC program. I'll be going through in detail each of these, but the three different tracks, we're calling them, are all free, and the tracks are a rapid response, tactical actions, and community futures. So I'm going to start by describing what a rapid response project is. So rapid response projects are short, defined ideas that could be really completed quickly. They might engage a University of Minnesota researcher for 10 to 20 hours. They could take from 2 to 4 weeks to complete. They would end in a concrete deliverable. So this is a great fit for communities that have a specific need for support or technical assistance that really has a clearly defined outcome and might be a piece of a larger whole, or support that helps spur something forward into a larger project or process. So community members who are leading on rapid response projects, their responsibilities would be sort of outlining the need, identifying the deliverable or the product, and then providing related support materials, and then reviewing final deliverables. But it really would be that university partner who'd be putting in the legwork to produce that the work for that final deliverable. So there's some examples in this slides of, the kind of work that could be undertaken with a rapid response project. But in addition to this, you could imagine economic analyses, feasibility studies, small design projects, but there's really many other possibilities as well. So, just to help get imaginations going, let's imagine an example. So one example is let's say there's a community who applies and is interested in specifically putting in a new playground that might be in a park that's next to a river in their community. And they want to find a site where the playground would not be affected by flooding. So a rapid response project could involve engaging a researcher who might be looking at what is the projected flood risk for the site, and then delivering some designs for the proposed playground in locations that are projected to be more resilient to future extreme weather events. Now, I'll next talk about our tactical action track. So this is a longer term track, so around that 2 to 9 month length. And this provides small communities to engage with U of M teams in sort of this medium scale collaboration, but still where they might have clearly defined outcomes that they're looking for. And so there could still be, still be a defined outcome, but maybe there's more complexity to the proposed idea. Maybe there's more than just 1 or 2 research areas or research expertise that might be needed. So maybe a larger university team. And it's a great fit for communities that they have a clear idea of their needs or clear idea of the outcomes, and are sort of ready to launch in and realize some of those goals within this longer time frame. So similar to rapid response projects, communities' responsibilities and roles in these would be, sharing background materials, clarity on, what that clear vision or project idea is. And then they would be, that whatever community lead would be engaging with university teams more sort of on a weekly, bi-weekly basis, really walking alongside them as the work is produced in these weekly check-ins, but also supporting these teams in convening public events or listening sessions, advising on the processes and who might need to be at the table, and then also reviewing those final deliverables. So in addition to some of the examples here, here's another opportunity to imagine via an example. So let's imagine that the applicant is an organization that's at the beginning stages of developing a hiking trail system that goes through several small towns in a particular region. And they're interested in finding out how can the proposed trail really integrate some of the tourism assets in each of the downtowns. So a tactical action project might involve engaging a U of M research team to look at the trail's economic development potential in the region and facilitate some public meetings in each town that would gather ideas for how it might highlight or support the businesses and economies. And then it might result in a trail design proposal that integrates some of these new ideas that come from public input sessions. It could include data on the trail's economic development potential or designs for trail signage that highlight the unique identities and opportunities of each downtown that it crosses. And now I'm going to talk about our sort of longer term engagement opportunity, and we're calling it Community Futures. So this track is particularly exciting in that it really allows communities to dive deeply and walk alongside university teams for in that 6 to 12 month range and pursue visions and ideas that might be more complex or open-ended or really big picture. So what this Community Futures programs provides is an opportunity to work with a bench of researchers and practitioners who are from the University of Minnesota's Design Center. It's called the Minnesota Design Center. And communities participating in this track would have an opportunity to work with these members of the Design Center to apply a design thinking approach in order to respond to some of their goals and aspirations that they have. So some of the qualities that that communities would, similar qualities for this program is communities would have an opportunity to develop a vision or enhance an existing vision or strategy they already have using this collaborative process and design thinking. Identify, once they have that goal and strategy, identify specific projects that support the strategy. There may be many possible outcomes or possible project ideas. And then with these project ideas, identify funding opportunities, as well as some of those community champions that can help drive those forward. So again, similar to what we discussed before, the work might look different from community to community, but with this Community Futures project, some similar qualities will include, site visits that provide insight into some of the on-the-ground realities that inform the work, inclusive public engagement processes that would involve, a wide range of local community members, identifying and mapping assets and opportunities, creating new projects, identifying realistic funding opportunities, and many more. And so really each of these tracks, rapid response, tactical action, and community futures, provide interested communities a variety of ways and timescales to partner with the university. And again, I just want to emphasize, it is all right if you don't know which track your idea fits into. That's where your region's team member can really help with that project ideation or discussion. And when you submit your application form, you don't necessarily need to know, even at that stage, which track you want to follow. But if you do have a really clear vision, and it's just fine to indicate, which one you are specifically interested in. So please contact your region's team member to talk more about your ideas. And then they can share more information about, what each of these tracks look like, and also brainstorm a little bit about how they can really serve your needs and which direction you might want to move into. So now I'll pass it back to Kyle.
Thanks, Andy. So I just want to talk a little bit about the process now. And after this, I'll talk a little bit about the program structure itself, including eligibility and selection criteria as well. But just want to kind of give you a sense of how this is going to flow. So many of you have probably already visited the website. Rick has been putting those links into the chat. If you haven't been able to visit that yet, go ahead and do that. I will just give one caveat. It says Center for Transportation Studies at the top because we're the host of the team. But again, just to clarify, it's not specific to transportation projects. So we're really glad to host the website, and all of the ESMC pages are on that page. But I just wanted to answer any questions you might have as you go to that. So go to the website, read more, connect with your regional partners, as Andy was saying, to learn more about the program and talk about your ideas and projects. Once you do have that chance, you're going to submit a really simple intake form. There's a Google form that we're asking everybody to submit. There's a link to that as well in the chat, and you can investigate that a little bit. Very simple, pretty straightforward questions about what your project idea is, which community you're from, how you think it fits into the program, things like that. Then the way that this is going to work is that you'll have a more in-depth conversation with one of the regional representatives who will get a few more in-depth questions answered for you, for us to consider and to evaluate the programs. We're going to be sharing all of the applications with regional working groups who are going to sort of do a first pass through to say, we have some questions about these ideas. We think this one is really ready. We're excited about this, kind of give us an overview evaluation of things. From that group, that will produce sort of our finalist pool. We don't have a limited number on the finalist pool. We're hoping lots of people apply. We're hoping we have a really hard decision to think about who we can work with, because we know there's lots of great projects out there. Those finalists, the groups that come into the kind of finalist pool, will then meet with U of M teams who we think would be sort of that co-creator of the project scope with you. So that would be, if I'm the researcher and I'm working on the project with you, you would sit down with me and I'd say, great, here, I've read the document, I've read the intake form and the questions you've answered. Here's some questions I have for you. Here's the type of work that I could help bring to this question you're framing, or bring to this process. And together, the U of M group and the community would kind of co-develop a scope of work and a project plan. The community would get to say, yes, this fits for what we're looking for. This is the type of work we want to see. We think this will fit our needs. And only once that kind of co-created scope is agreed on and the work is agreed on, then that would be submitted for the final evaluation. We're doing this all as one big round, right? So people will apply by February 14th. We'll do the initial review. We'll have the finalist pools. We'll do the work scoping. And it's that work scoping document that will be finally reviewed by the ESMC team, and the final decisions for participation in sort of our first round will be selected from that group. And then hopefully as soon as those selections are done, we'll start to get the work done, because one of the benefits of having the structure set up is that there's not the plan of the scope of work is the agreement between the community and the university. The funding is already available for us to begin our work as soon as we have an agreed upon work scope with you. So that's a really great way. There's not like another contracting step or anything like that. So that's the overview of the process. That is gonna happen between the end of the, but right now through February 14th is the intake. Then the review will happen probably up through into April, and we're hoping to make decisions in April. And then to talk a little bit about the eligibility, sorry, it's going back and forth there on too many screens. Sometimes you can have too many screens in a webinar, and that time is right now. I've seen a few questions about this, and we kind of buried the lead, I suppose. Our definition of small communities for this program is 15,000 people or fewer based on the last census. We are going to give priority to communities of 5,000 or fewer, but any community under 15,000 is eligible to apply. That is the total. I've seen a few questions, so I'm going to clarify. That is the total population of a community. We're not, you can be an organization within a community of 15,000. You cannot be a community of less than 5,000 people within the city of Minneapolis, for example. You have to be a jurisdiction that has a population of less than 15,000. Your project has to take place in a jurisdiction of less than 15,000. The exceptions to that are that multiple communities of fewer than 15,000 people could submit sort of like a regional idea or a kind of neighbor city idea, as long as all of the participating jurisdictions or where the work would happen are fewer than 15,000 people. That's a possibility. This last bullet here, tribal nations, local government entities of all kinds, nonprofits, and community groups are all eligible to apply or be a part of consortiums that are applying. So we encourage partnerships. And all of those groups are able to be a team lead or to propose a project. And then we'll be evaluating in that process that I talked about on a range of topics, and you can see some of them here. The funding for this project is really oriented towards resilient and sustainable infrastructure. Again, we have infrastructure broadly defined for our program, but that is one of the goals of the legislature and of the university colleagues working on this. We want to make sure these are projects that really are adding value to your communities, improving quality of life, addressing challenges around resilience and sustainability, and we have some broader definitions about those on the site itself. Of course, we're looking for projects that are going to have high impact, that might be really innovative and help your communities move forward and towards a transformational vision. Really wanting to be specific as well about serving a need or closing a gap that's really pressing for you. And obviously we want to be thinking about projects that are realistic and actionable. Our goal is, like we said, to kind of move you through that pipeline towards the end where you're saying, okay, we're ready to apply for these grants. We're ready to compete for these programs. You want to have a project or a set of projects or ideas that are really doable and achievable. And so that's a big part of it. We have equity goals, and including the meaningful participation of historically underrepresented communities. We also hope that these projects and ideas are going to be community driven, so that we'll see if you're, as Andy was talking about, we want to have participation and leadership from community members throughout, and folks applying on the consortium teams, helping us and showing commitment and engagement with the process. And then also, if you're proposing an idea or have a broader vision that is going to affect a certain segment of your population or a certain community, a certain group within your community, we want to also make sure you've engaged that community, of course, right? We don't want to see projects that are saying, here's the solution for group X over here, and group X has not been consulted. So those are amongst the types of things that we'll evaluate, and can answer more questions about those at the end of the time here. But as we move forward here, I'm going to pass back to Andy to talk a little bit more about how communities will be engaged.
Excellent. So, I wanted to share, we've really, we've emphasized community leadership, and there's a lot of ways that we're setting up this program to be supporting the communities throughout, from, the beginning ideation and submission stage all the way through to the end. So one of the big ways that we're wanting to support communities involved in the process is with the support of your regionally based on the ground team member. So, we're here to be process navigators, even throughout, to be navigating the university, making sure community members might not be mired or confused by any parts of the processes or institutional collaboration. Our greater ESMC core team that is members of all of these collaborating institution, departments and programs, which I'll talk about later. All of us are here also to be keeping an eye on resources, and how can we be leveraging resources, our networks and contacts, to make sure that, we're actually providing all of these resources to support the full realization of these project ideas. And then we do have some funds also, specific dollars that can support community member participation. So this could be some funds for participation in focus groups or cultural liaisons, interpreters, but also it could be, stipends or mileage for community leads. So, but all of this, budgets are really created specific to project ideas at that finalist stage. So if you, as you're thinking about an idea, have specific budget considerations or financial needs that down the line will be important for whatever idea you have, for sure bring that to your team member, because we'll want to hear that ahead of time, but know that community members will be involved in co-creating the work plan at that finalist stage, which does include a budget. So, and again, many possible products and outcomes that are supported by this university partnership. So any questions about, what it means, what you need, how it works, go to your team member in your region, and we can really, help to talk more and help you navigate sort of what's on deck with a program like this. And so I'll pass it now to Kyle to talk a little bit about, the fullness of these project ideas.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, we as we were going through this, we realized that lots of people hear information in different ways, and it might be helpful to give a couple different versions of examples. And as Andy said earlier, she's talking through some of the potential examples in the paths. The example I'm about to give is just that. There are many, many projects. But we just want to, again, kind of give you a way to think about the pathways as we've been approaching them and thinking about them, just kind of, again, through this other set of examples. And then the idea here would be that you talk with the regional reps, talk with us about your ideas, and we can continue to develop. So just as one more final pass through before we go into the next steps and question and answers, I wanted to use an example of kind of showing how an idea might escalate through all three of our pathways. So let's say you're a community who says they have, who knows they have an upcoming park project. It's a really central part of their project. They want to design a new basketball court and they want to design a new area of their park. At a rapid response level, a question you might ask us is, hey, could you help us understand sort of demographically who's around this park, or who our residents are who would be most served by this? Or it might be something like, hey, we need some help just with a GIS map to show us, like, we can tell you what plot of land it is. We can show you where it is on a satellite picture. We want to help just like with the math of where does this basketball court fit? And if we put it there, where does this, and have somebody be able to design really quickly for you. Here's a schematic design of what that park could look like. Those are all things that could fit into that rapid response category. If we escalate that same idea to more of a tactical action thing, it might be, hey, actually, this park is alongside the creek that runs through our town, and that creek often floods and creates challenges for our public infrastructure and for our park systems and for these other things. As we're designing that park, how else might we think about shoring up that creek, or what else might we think about for the infrastructure that impacts that creek to ensure that the park we're building is more resilient and the investments that we or the state or the federal government makes last for longer? That's going to obviously take longer than those rapid response paths. It's going to take a little bit more engagement and bigger thinking ideas around what's going to be possible with the creek and how you would design that in connection with the park. And so that's a version of that same nugget of an idea at a tactical action. And then at the community futures level, as Andy was describing, this is a different process it's more design thinking questions, thinking about assets and where you're going. And so if you're a part of that process and pathway, they may start with the question of like, what's the goal with this park? Like, where does this fit into your vision for your community? And your answer may be something like, well, we want to make sure residents are healthy and have vibrant places and safe places to recreate, right? And then that opens up a whole world of opportunities and possibilities that group would walk through with you to say, okay, this park is perhaps one piece of that. Maybe that's one project in that broader vision. What else might fit into that vision? What other projects or what other ideas have you all been talking about? What other assets might you build on? And maybe by the end of that process, you see that the park design with the resilient creek design and other things is also connected to a trail that brings you back to the central part of your town, or interlacks with a highway project, and you have different conversations with local and state representatives about, hey, here's what we'd like to see on this segment of this highway, or we'd like to share this feedback on this highway. But the community futures piece really gives you that chance to open up. You may start with us on a conversation that's like, hey, we want to build this park and we need some help. And the community futures process is really intended to help you open that broader and think about that underlying vision and how else you can build on it.
So I just wanted to give an overview, again, here are all of the internal partners that are and departments that are collaborating on developing the ESMC program. So we have Kyle as CTS, but there's the Humphrey School, Minnesota Design Center, Regional Sustainable Development Partnerships, Cura and the Resilient Communities Project. But the university partnerships that are created for each particular project are not limited to these 5 programs. So we actually have the access to the fullness of the university system to be creating these teams that could be serving some of these project ideas. So, it's really at that finalist stage that, a project idea might then help spark some of that, university inreach, we call it, of finding the right research expertise or right researcher to be coming in and helping to serve that project that could be beyond any of the programs that we have available, but they could be within some of these programs that we're that are collaborating on, ESMC. And then the other thing I wanted to do is just point you again to the ESMC website. This is our next step opportunity. So definitely log on to the website. There's a lot of information there, some summaries. We are recording the webinar, so we'll be posting the recording to our website if you want to return to any of this information or, pass this information along to folks in your network. Definitely reach out to your region's team member with ideas or questions or interest. And we have contact info on the website. And then we also have the online application is right there on the website. And there's a link in this slide as well. So, we just encourage you to get in touch, reach out, take a look at the information, and we hope that you'll be interested in bringing ideas to the table and taking part in this work.